Good evening, folks. How are we doing? This is a stream I've been planning to do for a little while now. So it's a slightly unusual one. As you can kind of possibly tell by the fact I have my purple background, which I use for creative streams as opposed to lunch chats or gaming streams. So what we're going to be doing this evening is we are going to be diving into an adventurer's guide to love, life, and villainy, which those people watching this live, I probably don't need to explain what this is, but for people who join or people who watch this back, let me give a little bit of introduction on this one. So Adventurer's Guide to Love, Life, and Villainy is an upcoming, at the time of recording, Romantasy short story anthology brought to you by Treat Your Geek. It is coming out at the end of the month, and because I was not organised enough to stick something for the bots to do, I'm just going to chuck the link in the chat. Please, pre-order it there. I believe digital pre-orders are on there. Physical pre-orders are not quite up yet, but they will be there soon. It's coming end of the month, 30th of April. But we'll get into the specifics of that in just a second, because I did promise I was going to do something first. And no, this is technically not a sponsored stream, though I was given this as part of my contract for this. I don't think that makes this a sponsored stream. Before we get into this, I did promise I was going to open something on stream first. So I received this in the mail, which I hastily stuck some stickers over to avoid self-doxing myself. Hello there. Love the username of Hey Mandy. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for following just in advance of this. I really appreciate it. So I promised I was going to open this on stream. I'm slightly nervous about the fact that Mash asked me to open this on stream, about what I'm about to reveal to the world. But let's have a look. So what we have here. Things. Right. So I was approached by Mash the other day asking whether I would be interested in helping to proofread and edit one of her upcoming novels. I said yes, of course, absolutely, and very kindly Mash offered to send me a physical copy of the previous volume so that I could familiarise myself with the plot, the characters, the degree of smut involved in books. And then I was just sent... Let's have a look what we've got here. So we have two volumes of Treat Your Geek stuff. Is this a compilation of the magazine? It is indeed. It is a 2 volumes of compilations of the Treat Your Geek magazine that existed before it being a digital channel for all the reviews, books, whatever classification we put Breakfast Bants into. I'm not quite sure what legally we can categorize that out, but before it became that, we have it was a magazine, and it looks like I have volumes 11 and 12 here, which let's show these up to the camera and try and avoid reflections of the ring light. There we go. Very, very nice. Let's have a look. Fancy stuff. Let's have a look. See what else we've got here. I should have put a stool next to me. This was an error. So I'm going to have to put these on the floor. Sorry. Let's have a look. And we've got in a very lovely kind of pinky purple tissue paper. For supporting my small business. Thank you for supporting my small business. Well, I'm going to try not to rip this. I'm going to fail, frankly. I would have sent you the full set, but there are a lot. Honestly, this alone is just awesome. Let's have a look. So we have 2 boxes of decent girth. We have The Light of Mirror, A Prelude to Light, a prequel collection by Ash Hester. Ash Hester, this name seems somehow familiar. There we go. And we have The Light of Mirror, Book 1, A Guard's Refrain by Ash Hester. For those who don't know, I mean, I think you probably do if you're here. Ash Hester is Mash's professional name for doing professional type things. But look at these. These are lovely. Look at these. So, so pretty. Nom de Mash. Should we read the back of one of these? The Light of Mirror, prelude to light, a forbidden romance, love and loss, a hunt for power and glory. Amamantra's guardian reflects on their time watching over the mortals under its care, but was it all worth it? Witness the stories before the story. Venture into the world of Amamantra in this collection of 15 short stories set before the events of Ash Hester's debut epic fantasy novel, A Guard's Refrain. Meet the characters, experience the defining moments of their lives, and discover the history which drives them. All the while, the Guardian's story reveals itself. This is only the beginning. A powerful debut. Love it. Love it. And I very much look forward to reading these. Ooh, like 200-ish pages each. Nice. I have some reading to do. Marvellous. And we also have, what do we also have there? We got some stickers as well. So let's hold these up. We've got some TYG. Got Spice Rack Incorporated, Sugar, Spice, and Unresolved Trauma. Woefully low potassium required. Not commenting on that one. If it's Bants, it's bullshit. Love it. You're perfect. Nah. And I will always protect you. These are cute as fuck. Not gonna lie. I will try and hold these all up. Light reflectiveness. Very nice. And let's get those ones a little closer to the camera. Those stickers will hurt later. Okie doke. That is a lovely box of stuff. Thank you very much, Mash. I look forward to reading those. And now the pressure is on because I need to read these before I can start actually proofing, editing stuff. But no, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I noticed some more people have appeared. So having done the unboxing bit, let us get into the main purpose of this stream. So we are talking about you could always get away with just refrain. Train of thought has derailed already. There we go. Right, so we are talking about An Adventurer's Guide to Love, Life and Villainy, coming out at the end of the month. Please follow the shiny link that's out. Well, the link is of the expected amount of shininess. The content there is very shiny. So let's talk a little bit about this and what this stream is about. So this stream is it's two-part. It is a little bit of behind the scenes. It is also it's a storytelling stream. So I'm going to be reading you a short story, debuting a short story, as it were. And I'm going to take a swig of beer as I do this. I'm drinking Blood Orange IPA. It's quite nice, not gonna lie. Talk a little bit about what led us to this. Stream. So, An Adventurer's Guide to Love, Life and Villainy is a Romantasy short story anthology coming out from Treat Your Geek, involving me and a number of people who are currently watching this live on Twitch, and others who are in other time zones or just slacking. Honestly, where's the dedication? I don't know. So I was... Oh, good grief. I should probably get my facts straight before I start this. I was messaged, I think, by Mash. So actually, it may even have just been something that was mentioned during a Breakfast Band stream. Mash very kindly recognised that I do write things. This is true. I should pause what I'm saying and say, happy birthday, Mandy. Happy birthday. You're awesome. Please feel free to shower with emotes and stuff like that, because you are awesome. And your story is awesome. Right, let's get the train back on the rails. So yes, Mash said, do you have any kind of romantasy short stories that you might want to include in a short story collection? because I think at the time there were a few, but Mash was worried there weren't quite enough for the book. Now, I've written a fair few short stories in my time, none published, sadly, but I have a great stash of short stories and poems and half-written novels and stuff on my hard drive. And I thought, well, do I have a Romantasy short story? And I was kind of optimistic in this regard, knowing full well I have never actually written that genre. I've written fantasy of various kinds. I've written bits of sci-fi, bits of mystery, horror, stuff like that. And while elements of aforementioned half-finished novels include romantic elements, Romantasy, so romance fantasy, mashed together, as it were, pun intended, is never a genre I'd explored. So I thought, well, just in case, I'll check through to see if I've accidentally written a Romantasy short story at some point. But I said to Mash, look, if I haven't, then I will happily write something. Because one, I hadn't written any fiction for a while, and secondly, I like the challenge of a genre that I've not written before. So I said, sure, absolutely. And then realised I actually had to do the damn thing. Which is a problem, committing to stuff and then realizing you actually have to do it at some point. It's a ridiculous situation to be in, but oh well. And I was racking my head of what to write. There was a strong possibility it was going to involve orcs. For those who have read the short story collection, I think all of us seem to have a crush on orcs in general. It's a thing, but there we go. Let's not analyse that too much. But there we go. All the best stories involve orcs. It's true. It's true. It's like one of those, take the title of a film and stick pants in it and it makes it more entertaining. It's, take any story of any kind and put orcs in it and it's more entertaining. Possibly, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, so I didn't really know what I was going to do other than the fact I committed to do this thing. And then a couple of days passed and my brain was just wandering around some ideas, and I had a notion. I had a notion of how a short story could end, because it's based on, and I'm not going to spoil this for people who've not read it, because I'm going to read the damn thing in like 5 minutes. I had a notion of how it was going to end, and it's an idea that I've been batting around my head for a little while now, which is not a particularly clever idea, but it's something I think I had tweeted, or tweet equivalented at some point of, here's a little thing, and I thought, well, actually, that could be a nice little zinger at the end of a story. Something that I thought was an interesting, I think unintended consequence of something that's in D&D rules. That I thought was quite interesting. And I thought that if framed correctly, something that could be an interesting little rules quirk with perhaps a slightly unintended consequence could be a really good button to the end of a short story. And then I realised the words that were going to go with it. And then I realised I had to do the thing which I always do when I end up writing, because I've come up with a moment. I've come up with a point in time that I'm really happy with, and then I have to earn that moment. I then have to work backwards, leading up to that point to deserve, I think gravitas is a stretch, but to deserve that being a payoff to anything at all. So as always with writing, I wrote this completely out of order. Like, honestly, if you ever see work in progress stuff, whether it be fiction or tabletop RPG stuff, I write the bits that are clear in my head at the time. It's like, right, let's write that paragraph, let's write that rule, let's write that subclass, whatever it's going to be. And then I have great blocks of text that are highlighted yellow, which are generally notes to future Dave, like something dark side leads to this. It's like the Underpants gnomes. It is like something broadly like this leads to this point. And it works for me. Inevitably, I sometimes I'm cursing the things that Pastor Dave has written, and I have to change my mind, and sometimes they don't always join up. I have the advantage that the novel that I'm primarily working on has something that's got time jumps in it that allows me, from a continuity perspective, it makes it easier to fix stuff that, errors or whimsical moments that past Dave has put in as traps for future Dave. It allows me to iron that out. But it works for me as a system. I can never write from start to finish, even a first draft, because I'm very much aware that, and for the writers out there, make it exist first, make it good second. That is fine, but I just can't write it chronologically from start to finish. I have to hop all over the space, fill in those yellow bits as they go, and eventually I go, oh wow, all the yellow bits are gone. In theory, this means I have a first draft of a whatever it is. And then I read it, generally aloud, from start to finish, and realise if it's any good or not, and then iron stuff out, and then curse myself where I've used the same narrative trick or particular phrase that I keep dropping into things, again and again. It's like, crap, I've got to iron that out. Or if I realise that the pacing is off, that I've revealed something too early, or it's got too serious too soon, or the points of levity don't quite work, or whatever it might be. But that's how I work. I do it in all sorts of orders. I fill in the yellow bits, and that's how I get my first draft. It works for me. Probably doesn't work for other people, but there we go. So that brings us to this short story that came from a D&D rule that I thought had an interesting quirk and a phrase that could go with it. And I realised that I had the basis of a story. I just had to write the damn thing. That technically fell into the category of romantasy, in that it was fantasy that was about love, romantic love. I had to apologise to MASH. I can't remember what stage the apologies started. I can't remember if it was still a work in progress or if it was a fait accompli, but there were apologies to MASH because she presumably wanted something that was fun, flirty, a little bit sexy, a little bit smutty, potentially, depending which avenue you wanted to go down. And I gave something that was, it had elements of all of that, but also was kind of tragic. It's got some unhappy bits in it. I'm not going to lie. But it was the story that was spawned. So I wrote it, and MASH very kindly accepted it, cursing, because now there are content warnings at the start of this book that are entirely my fault, and I am sorry about that. I should probably actually read those at some point to make sure that I've actually covered them off. So I will go through those content warnings before I start reading this. And I can only apologise to anyone who comes in late. So that's how we ended up with my romantasy, tragedy. I'm not going to try and mash those together, but I want to do it. It was only a reference to, we thought we'd be safe. No, that is fair. I think it's better safe than sorry. And then there was a question later on, because I did end up proofing all of these stories, like actually where was the best place for this short story to go, because it does strike a different tone to the other stories. Not that all the others are the same, they're very much not, but I think it's the only one that goes quite that hard into tragedy. So it was a question of, you probably don't want to end on this one, but what does it bookend against? And actually it's the second story in the book, but there we go. So I think we'll dive into this. I'll try not to stop as we go through. If anyone has questions, comments, etc., I'll obviously get to them at the end rather than interrupting it. It's not going to take too long. It's 5 pages long. But I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to turn the music off just because it's a little bit distracting for me reading. And let's do the content warnings, and then we'll dive into this with a swig of drink. So, content warnings. While the utmost care has been taken when dealing with darker storylines, we appreciate some readers would prefer to be warned of triggering content and adult themes. This book includes depictions of sex, with use of mild language, mentions of alcohol, depictions of mild gore and fighting, and reference to near child loss and stillbirth. That last one is definitely me. Bits of the other ones are also. I think the content warning's got expanded. So it's not just Dave wrote a story that's just a pain in the arse. But there we go. So, without further ado, maybe, possibly, I fail the first words. It's Dave's fault. It is always Dave's fault. There we go. Okay, let's dive into this, shall we? And yeah, I'm reading this from the screen rather than the book, because otherwise you're just going to be seeing the reflection of the ring light in my bald head. Okay, so I'm reading it from the screen instead. Vows by D.C. Bradshaw. You can go in. As the warden opened the door, it was the smell that hit him first. The acrid smell and taste of incense, desperately trying to flood his senses, overwhelming them to the point of confusion, lest they betray the scent of something far worse underneath. The room was made of pale stone and lit by flickering candles somewhere off to the sides where Arias's eyes dared not to wander, for they were transfixed on the dark stone table in the centre of the room and the body that lay upon it. I'll leave you in peace. There she was. Not quite the face he remembered. The fire had seen to that. But beyond the burns, her right side was paler than he'd ever seen it before. Gone was the vibrant green, replaced with a solemn, lifeless grey, as if the very joy had drained from her body in that instant, leaving behind a cold reflection of his wife. And then his eyes drifted to the other side of her. The priests had dressed her in fresh clothes, hiding much of the damage, but there was little they could do about her face. She'd always said that the women of the Frostwolf clan were tough as old boots, but there were limits to even an orc's endurance. Tears were beginning to form now, as he reached out to touch her unburned cheek. Her skin was cold and lifeless, so very different from the passionate woman who had swept him off his feet all those years ago and taught him how to live and love. Gently, he turned her face ever so slightly to one side, as if hiding the scarring would somehow dull the pain, and allow him, if just for a moment, to fool himself with the notion that the horrors of the previous days were nothing but a terrible nightmare. But it was to no avail. No amount of self-delusion would change the fact that she was dead. He winced and tilted her face back once more, took a breath, and looked at the cruelty the fire had inflicted. Maybe, in some other life, she would have been proud to have worn those awful scars. Certainly her parents would have been. A trophy of survival, if only. His thoughts lapsed into memory. He couldn't help but remember the first time he had met the elder Frostwolves, and then, several months later, when Nicky had met so many of his own family. Despite her fears, there had been no judgment from his parents, and he'd spent weeks assuring her of that fact, and yet, even still, she spent the evenings before acquainting herself with all manner of antiquated elvish customs. It didn't matter what success she achieved in life, even as captain of the city guard, she always feared that people would somehow judge and persecute her for her lineage. But, despite their highborn ancestry and demonstrable reputation for snobbery, not even a hint of such prejudice was ever seen in his parents' house. Yet it never stopped her from worrying. He stroked her cheek, and instinctively he brushed his finger against the tip of one of her tusks, remembering the pains she had taken to hide her lisp throughout the first family dinner, a charade she attempted any time they met in the years that followed. It was perhaps the most stressful element of their wedding planning, as she obsessively practiced her vows, striving for unnecessarily perfect diction. And so she had on the day, until the very last moments of their vows, when the slightest hint of that adorable lisp had snuck out as she spoke of all things, her husband's name. His name. Arias couldn't help but smile about it at the time, but that smile was now long gone, buried beneath ash and tears. God, how he missed her voice. He sighed. They were right, you know. Even as a whisper, his voice echoed uncomfortably throughout the chamber. We never should have moved here, Nick. Not so close to the mountains.
The Frostwolves lived in the hills for many generations. In days of yore, their reputation preceded them, not only as skilled warriors, but as an unquestionable authority on the nature of the land and the creatures that dwelt within it. Those days of clan life were now lost to history, as his wife's extended family were now spread across land and the sea. And yet, when she told any of them of their intention to buy a house and start a family in Dramheim, the same warning was spoken. Stay away. Dragons live beneath those cliffs. Dragon. He hadn't said the word since the attack. Even now, 4 days after the fact, he still hadn't said it. When people made conversation, trying to comfort each other, he always reached for euphemisms. The attack, the incident, the fire. But never the truth. He dismissed their concerns as old wives' tales and shamanic prophecies of a forgotten age, with hindsight and arrogant streak of the snobbery his parents were accused of. But they had been right all along. And now he'd paid the price for that repulsive hubris. The first sign had been the city bells chiming. He may have heard them, but he did not listen, and if he had, he would still have ignored them, for so engrossed was he in his craft that nothing, not even a civil disturbance, would shake him from his artistry. He was working, and everyone in the quarter knew that Arias Aaron Frostwolf is not to be disturbed when he's working. Somehow the piece of jewellery he'd been slaving over that day had seemed more important than any distraction, any warning the city's guards might have meant in the frenetic ringing of those bells. Now he couldn't even recall what the piece was. Just that while the city braced itself for an attack that would shatter families and reduce homes, towers, and temples to rubble, he ignored it all and fastidiously laid gemstones into sculpted pieces of precious metal. It all seemed so pointless now. "Till death do us part," he muttered, echoing those vows of so long ago. They'd always known this day would come. The bards might proclaim that love somehow inexplicably conquers all, but blood and lineages are not so easily defied. Once in a while, in an unguarded moment on cold, lonely nights, they might hint at that terrible, unspoken conversation, the terrible truth. She'd always been so matter-of-fact about the whole thing, but it never sat well with him. The notion of her one day passing to age, while he and their children lived on for years, likely centuries more. And so he always deflected, as if not speaking those words aloud would somehow prevent them from manifesting and, in doing so, hold back the inevitable sands of time. But fate had other ideas. It would not be age that took her from him. "I always thought we'd have longer, more time together. Now the kids are away with their apprenticeships, I thought we'd have some us time. Some peace and quiet." Quiet. With the utterance, the room instantly seemed colder, and the walls seemed somehow further away. Just him and her body, alone in the stillness. It was a strange, uncomfortable feeling for him, being unsettled by silence, for he would normally take comfort in being alone with his thoughts, but at that moment he would have given anything for someone, something, to cut through the emptiness. As his heart raced, he suddenly remembered the horrible familiarity of this sensation from long ago. The anticipation of their first kiss, the uncertainty of their future after their first night together in the wake of the little death, the eternity of silence on one knee, waiting for her to answer his question. And Katie's birth. If there was one moment before then that chilled him to his very core with the terror of silence, it was the birth of their firstborn. The labour had been so hard on Nicky, with the priest spending most of the night preparing him for the worst, even so far as reminding them of the uncertainty of healing magics on one so young. When further complications beset, they had no choice but to remove their little girl from Nicky more directly. It seemed to him a barbaric combination of butchery and sorcery, but they assured him it was for the best, and the only option if there was any hope of saving both mother and child. And so he waited. And after what seemed like an eternity, out emerged one of the sisters, carrying a tiny girl with grey-green skin. But she was silent. The panic had set in immediately. His entire career was built upon his keen eyesight, steady hands, and calm, meticulous nature. But in that instance his senses failed him completely, and any notion of calmly watching for her breathing never crossed his mind, so instead he waited in the silence, hoping to hear something, anything, any hint of a cry or whimper to indicate the slightest signs of life. Arias snapped out of his recollections and stared once more at the table. Unlike that day, his senses were clear, but no such clarity would relieve his torment. He had never considered himself a religious man, which some would consider an anomaly. He knew the gods existed, or some of them at least, but he never felt he owed them any homage or servitude. But that day, when both Nicky and little Katie left the temple alive, he thanked as many of them as he could. When she was well enough to hear them, the priest tried to warn her of the potential dangers of further children, but she hadn't taken kindly to such a suggestion. She was a frost wolf, and thus she would rise to such a challenge, and by the gods she'd succeeded. They're doing okay. They will be okay. I promise. Even if I'm not. But soon, my love, we'll be together again. The children had certainly been coping better than he. They had their mother's pragmatism, after all, as well as their training to fall back on. A captain of the guard and a master jeweller for parents, he'd hoped at least one of them might turn to the arts for their apprenticeship, but their mother's unspoken influence was too strong, and all three had turned to more practical professions. Katie, an accomplished Fletcher with an aptitude for archery thrown into the mix, Niral, their second-born, a talented smithy excelling in the crafting of armour, and Mirren, their youngest, who, in his mind, had barely started her education, let alone having finished it, enlisted as a guard recruit, with the whispers of a promotion already begun. You know, I never thought I'd make anything of any real significance. Just trinkets and finery for those with more wealth and sense. It's our kids, Nick. They proved me wrong. Else, they've been proving me wrong for so many years. The one heck of an accomplishment. Gods, I wish you'd seen them. I wish had seen them. The bells were ringing and they stood shoulder to shoulder with their guildmates in defence of this damned city, all while I obsessively finessed pointless luxuries. It was as if the tears that rolled down his cheeks were in an instant ignited as the thoughts and memories flooded over him, crashing through his mental barriers and stripping back his intellectual mind into a well of raw, uncut emotion. Regret, shame, guilt, despair, emptiness, worthlessness, impotence. He didn't even feel his knees buckle beneath him. Just the sudden impact of the cold granite floor against his face, swiftly followed by the throbbing of hot blood upon his lips. In the flickering candlelight, Arias wept. Ever since his wedding day, he'd taken to idly playing with his wedding ring in times of contemplation, twisting it slowly upon his finger or spinning it upon his desk, as if the rotation of the silver band would somehow accelerate the cogs of his mind as they processed calculations both conscious and dormant. Now, in his despair, he simply clutched his left hand, holding tight his cherished creation in desperation, an emotional boy in the darkness. Somewhere, just on the other side of a wooden door, but far beyond his conscious thought, a hand gently knocked, and, with it, Arias's eyes opened. "With this ring, I thee wed," he whispered, looking down at his hand. I was so very proud of these. You were as well, which was far more important. You knew that, right? I was sure you weren't going to actually say yes. I didn't take the time to embellish your engagement ring. I had to fix that the second time. If you were going to wear something for the rest of your life, I needed to do it right. More than right. It had to be perfect. Looking up, he saw the tip of her fingers draped over the edge of the obsidian slab, the sight of which mustered just enough energy for Arias to draw himself back to his feet. Then, reaching out ever so gently, He traced her finger back to the knuckle where her own wedding ring still lay, somehow unsinged by the fire. The ring was silver, like his own. They had considered gold for a short while, with it still being the metal of choice for such things, but Nicky's sage skin would never have suited the lustre of gold upon it, and so they'd settled on silver. Next came the stones. From the moment he'd considered the notion of proposing to her, Arias had imagined rubies on her finger to match the deep crimson pool of her eyes. Less traditional, but still more than acceptable in such circumstances. And then, at the moment he sought to source the gems for her ring, he uncharacteristically changed his mind, opting instead for a single, traditional stone. A second knock, louder than the first, and this time accompanied by a voice, but still not enough to penetrate the well of Arias's introspection. Nerves. Unimaginable nerves, even though there was nothing to be nervous about. The day was going to be the happiest of his life, surrounded by all their friends and family, but he had spent the night before his wedding consumed by nerves. And of what exactly? Public speaking? He had been doing it since the earliest days of his education. Public dancing. Again, he had an education to fall back on, and traditionalist parents keen to pass on a multitude of classical steps that even the most extravagant of galas would likely deem to be a bit much. Public displays of affection, perhaps, during the earliest days of their courtship at least, but now he knew better, and even on that day, over a year since their first kiss, the exhilarating rush of Nicky's touch would still quell any foolish notion of embarrassment. So what had he to be so nervous about? It was a question that had sat with him for years, and only now, all too late, did he realize what it had been. The fear of imperfection. The day was supposed to be perfect. The so-called greatest day of his life. And what if he made a mistake? What if on this day of absolute bliss he did something to ruin it? With hindsight it was nonsense, but hindsight always granted far greater clarity than anything in the moment, and Arias had always been a person who worried about everything, large or small, no matter how certain he was of the outcome. What if there was something more he could do? What if the difference between him doing or not doing something was the tipping point between success and failure? What if? It was Nicky who had always comforted him in these moments. Nicky who would take his head in her hands, kiss him gently on the forehead, and calm the cacophony of maddening voices. She had always been a creature of passion, a formidable swordswoman not to be crossed, a lover who had never hesitated to make her desires known, a mother who would fight and die for her children. But more than all those things, she was his rock, a calming influence when the chaos of the world became too much. He opened his eyes and looked down at the wedding ring, no longer on her hand, but instead held gently between his thumb and forefinger. This was perfection. He had slaved on it for so long that he feared the word no longer held any meaning. But then, one evening, as he'd obsessively weighed up just one more alteration in the hope that it would achieve that elusive, aesthetic purity, she'd stopped him. She reached for his hand, held him close, kissed his face, and said that it was beautiful. And from that moment, he couldn't perceive any such imperfections in it, nor comprehend why he believed there were any to begin with. A single final tear dripped onto his fingers, and with it he closed his hand, encasing the ring and that last embodiment of his sorrow in a tomb of flesh and bone. And he knew what he had to do. It was the third knock that snapped him from his contemplations, quickly followed by the creak of the door opening. Standing there was an elderly figure in plain grey robes. Upon her neck she wore a heavy amulet, and on her lips a mournful smile. The temple has seen so much death over the years, and this room has borne much of it. 1,000 widows and widowers have stood and sat where you are now, unable or unwilling to hear the words that I have said to them. But today is a different conversation, or at least I hope it may be. As I explained when we spoke yesterday, the spell requires a diamond of significant quality, which is not something the temple can simply provide. Do you have such a gem? Glancing down, Arias opened his hand, and, for the first time in days, the faintest of smiles crept upon his tear-stained face. I do.
Okay, so that's it. That is Vows, the Romantasy short story, which I slightly foolishly wrote for Adventurer's Guide to Love, Life, and Villainy. It's a Romantasy short story anthology that is coming out at the end of the month. I will stick the link shamelessly in the chat again for those joining us who have not already pre-ordered it, or indeed have a copy because they were involved in writing it. So yeah. So that's it. Like I said, not a traditional Romantasy story, methinks. I mean, Romantasy can always be a bit brooding, but I think I went overly brooding with it. But I'm happy with it, and I'm glad I wrote it. So going back to what I said at the start, my notion for the whole story hinged on the fact that for the non-D&D players here, any spells that raise the dead in any manner, whether it's Revivify that brings back someone who has been dead for like up to 5 minutes, to like True Resurrection, which is like the most ultimate of resurrection spells, they all require diamonds of increasing quality and increasing value. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like one of them requires like a diamond worth 5,000 gold pieces. So a couple of years ago, don't know, time is a weird soup, not sure, but a while ago it suddenly clicked in my head that if fantasy worlds like D&D world is anything like the real world, and wedding rings traditionally have diamonds upon them, that does mean that potentially you have anyone who loses their spouse potentially has the ingredient needed to bring them back from the dead if something awful happened. And obviously, depending on the quality of the gemstone, how readily possible that is. And when I was thinking about the fact I committed to writing a story for MASH, this notion leapt back into my head. Something that I always thought was kind of cute and sort of whimsical. The fact that, oh, look, your wedding ring can be used to bring back your dead spouse. And I thought, well, what if that was where this story was going? And then the notion of the traditional, it is a bit of an anachronism in that sense. The traditional wedding vows we have in the real world, certainly for Christian weddings, of, all this till death do us part, and I do. And then I realized that the two come together at the end. The question of whether he has the gemstone, he opens his hand, the wedding ring's there, I do. And I just had to thread back through it some of those traditional vows, so that him saying I do would be both him answering the question and reminiscent of traditional wedding vows, and hence the name of the whole thing being Vows. It originally started off as Till Death Do Us Part, but I changed it to Vows to be more positive. And thank you, Euphemisms, which is a great name. Love it. Thank you very much for the follow. I really do appreciate it. So that is that's my short story that I wrote for this. Like I said, it's a little bit different. It is one off the top of my head of 6 that are in the story. In the book. I'm not going to tell you much about the others, other than the fact they're a little bit different. The other stories are called A Song of Devastation and Devotion, Vows, Zebediah, Crushed Starlights, The Path of the Monk, and Death and Second Chances. There are familiar threads to all of them, not just the fact that we all want a muscly orc lady to carry us away. There are familiar threads there, but they're all a bit different. I think you'll really enjoy them. And I'm without spoiling anything, because I'm not going to announce anything, because it's not my place to announce anything, we authors of this are already talking about what's next, and it's going to be exciting. I need to actually knuckle down and do some writing for it, but more exciting things are afoot, and I am really looking forward to what happens next in these. And it's also spurred me that I really need to, once I've done all the stuff I need to do for the Little But Fierce Kickstarter, and before jumping into another season or some point later seasons of Short Thoughts, I do in fact need to actually finish writing my novel, because this one novel that's been in my head for a very, very long time. I've written half of it, I think. There's still a lot of yellow. There's still a lot of chapter headings, which like there needs to be a chapter about this that I've not actually written any words of. But I need to write it, because this has proved that, well, at least I hope that my writing is not terrible, and that, yeah, people might indeed want to read it, or in this case, listen to it. So yeah, I need to actually do that. But yeah, that's been fun. That's been fun. Okie doke. I think we will draw it to a close there. It would seem weird for me to pivot this stream into me playing some retro gaming or something like that. So I think I'm going to call it here. And maybe I might actually do some writing, because I'm in the mood to do it. I feel inspired by all of this. Have an early night. I mean, that is a genius idea. It's not going to happen, but I like the optimistic nature of that suggestion. I'm terrible at it. I really am. So I think we are going to raid out in just a second. Let's see who is about. Good grief, loads of people are streaming. So I am going to go for the person with the fewest people in the stream, I think, if that seems fair. So I think we're going to raid the Opera Geek in just a second. If you don't know the Opera Geek, Kelly Butler is an amazing creative person, an opera singer, tabletop RPG person, streamer, and just a delight. Really she is. But I suppose before we do said raid, I should probably do the wrapping up stuff and the self-promotion stuff, because I'm terrible at doing it. So let's do this and try and do this properly. So thank you very much for joining this slightly unusual stream, which was me talking about the writing of and reading my short story, Vows, from Adventurer's Guide to Love, Life and Villainy. Again, for the last time tonight at least, I'm going to shamelessly stick the link, the pre-order link in the chat, so please pre-order. Pretty cheap to get the digital copy, so at the very least get that, or wait to get the physical copy. It's quite pretty and will look nice on your shelf. And look at this artwork, isn't it lovely? If you have enjoyed this and want to join me for the other stuff I do, £4.99 for print. There we go. If you'd like to join me for other streams, I tend to do lunch streams on Mondays and Wednesdays when it's not the Easter holiday, where I talk about general geeky stuff and sometimes play board games. I also do various gaming streams at various times. I'm terrible at holding a schedule. This is a terrible advertisement for myself. It really is. I have a 5-year-old child and a really busy day job. So streaming schedules are kind of dependent on bedtimes and how knackered I am, essentially. But yes, if you have enjoyed this, you can find me on Twitch and YouTube at DC Bradshaw. If you've not realised, I kind of parallel stream while doing all of this. So, yeah, please follow me in both those places. If you'd ever like to give me your Twitch subscription, whether it's a Prime subscription or not, that would be awesome. But there is I'm not going to force you to do it, because that would be weird. If you would like to support me in generally doing anything, I have Ko-fi, coffee, however you want to pronounce it, in the bottom left of your screen. Essentially, that just goes towards subscriptions and stuff, and not even fun subscriptions. It pays for like my Zoom subscription, so I can record really good interview quality stuff. It goes for paying for my podcast hosting and stuff like that. So please consider doing that. And Nightbot, you've wonderfully timed that. If you ever want to buy me something, for the record, it's my 40th birthday on August 28th. Feel free to buy me a book from my Throne. And this is a lovely segue here, because my Throne link, other than a couple of things I quite like for streaming, it's all books that guests on my podcast have suggested to me. If you've not enjoyed Short Thoughts, or well, actually, that's probably setting myself up for failure saying that. But if you've not watched or listened to any episodes of Short Thoughts, and a link for Short Thoughts is going in the Twitch chat right now. I ask my guests 10 slightly foolish interview questions, but one of which is about a book that they would recommend to everyone, and all of said books are on my throne list. So if you'd ever like to buy me a present, for example, for my 40th birthday on August 28th, you could do so from my throne, so please consider doing that. I am also working towards YouTube partner here, so if you could watch episodes of Short Thoughts or any of my other content on YouTube, that would just be wonderful, because it would be lovely to get a little bit of money from actually doing this, because I don't get a lot from Twitch, I'm not going to be honest. Yeah, I claim to be a writer who can make words good. Honestly, Dave, seriously, I should wrap this up. That is about it, I think. So I think we're going to do a raid across to the Opera Geek, so I'm just going to set that up now. If you are in YouTube land, you're just going to get to my closing screen instead. But let us set up a raid. Kelly is playing Civ 7, which I've not played any of yet. I don't actually have it. Yeah, I'm still playing a lot of Civ 6 when I do play such things. But let us prepare this raid, and I will sign off, and hopefully I will see you soon. I am hoping to do a couple of gaming streams over this long weekend, but we shall see. Alrighty, have a lovely evening. Thank you very much all, and I will see you all soon. Bye.